What would you do if you had 3 days to see? Well, for most of us, that question doesn't mean a whole lot. A better question might mean, what would you do if you had 3 days where you couldn't see? Now, what am I talking about? So, I'm in a class for chronic fatigue syndrome, and this last week, one of the coaches brought up a article or an essay written by Helen Keller, where she describes what she might do if she were given 3 days to see. And she brings up some very interesting and also some very humbling points throughout the article. Things that really make you think, especially for those of us who have been so fortunate to have the ability to see. And do we really stop and appreciate the small, subtle things in life, or do we just gloss right over them as if nothing really happened? You see, one of the points that Helen Keller really touched on was the fact that, sadly, with most things in life, you don't really appreciate what you have until it is gone. Because for some reason, we are so ungrateful for the things that we do have, and we're always longing for something more, something else that's going to satisfy us, and we never find it. But one thing we certainly take for granted in life are the small, little, everyday moments. The birds chirping in the forest, the sound of rushing water, or even standing or dancing in the rain. These small, seemingly simple tasks often carry a lot of joy with them if we take the time to stop and truly appreciate them, rather than walking right past them, like how I think most of us do if we were being honest with ourselves. Now, there are a few points that Helen makes in this essay that I want to read out loud and then talk about. I'll make sure and link the entire essay in the description. That way you can read the whole thing in its entirety if you'd like to. But let's start with this quote where Helen Keller says, "Only the deaf appreciate hearing. Only the blind realize the manifold blessings that lie in sight." You could stop right there. There's more I'm going to keep reading. But only the deaf appreciate hearing, and only the blind appreciate sight. How true is that? How many times do you wake up in your day and you're grateful for the ability to see and the ability to hear? Do we ever look up and say, "Thank you, God. Thank you for letting me like see and hear things"? No, we don't do that. Only the blind and the deaf appreciate hearing. Let's continue reading. She says, "Particularly does this observation apply to those who have lost sight and hearing in adult life. But those who have never suffered impairment of sight or hearing seldom make the fullest use of these blessed faculties. Their eyes and ears take in all sights and sounds hazily, without concentration, and with little appreciation. It is the same old story of not being grateful for what we have until we lose it, of not being conscious of health until we are ill." And there is so much truth in everything she just said. Even that last statement of not being grateful for health until we are ill. That is something I took for granted for a long time, was how fortunate I was to be healthy. I used to go for runs every day, I used to work a ton of hours, play with my kids, and I didn't give health much thought at all. I just kind of assumed that being sick was for those people, in my own arrogance. And it's been very humbling now to look back at that pride I had, and to look back now and look at it through an entirely different lens. Because now I am struggling with an illness, and it makes me fully appreciate those healthy years, and it makes me want to strive for that again. And once I get there, I want to live my life differently. To, number one, appreciate every day that I feel good, but even now, in the midst of my illness, to be grateful for my better days. And then on my worst days, just recognize that, hey, better days are coming. They may come and go like this, but I know I've been with my illness long enough now that there are good days and bad days. And so when the good days come, I have to enjoy those and be grateful for them. But in her statement, she also talked about how the eyes and ears take in all sights and sounds hazily without concentration. And isn't that true? We live in the digital age where we are constantly stimulating our eyes and ears. And yet, it seems to me that we are rarely actually concentrating on what we are absorbing, and we are not engaging with our senses, not truly. We're doing it in a sort of robotic or mechanical sense where we stare at the screen and we're looking at it, and that's the end of it. But we're not analyzing, we're not taking it in, because there's nothing really beautiful about technology per se. It's useful and it's a good tool. I mean, I've got a camera in front of me, I got light shining on me, I got a microphone right here, and a laptop over here. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I like technology. What I am saying, though, is that these are tools and devices. They are not something that is meant to stimulate our senses in any meaningful way. They are meant to, rather, I would say, de-stimulate you, which I may sound kind of counterintuitive at first, but here's what I mean. A phone, yes, is meant to stimulate your brain, but it's meant to do it in an addictive and dopamine-inducing kind of way, in a fashion where you are addicted to the phone. You are not appreciating or truly engaging with the content in front of you. It is going in one ear and out the other, or in one eye and out the other eye, if that's how that works. So that is my point, is that we are not truly stopping to engage with things. Whereas, if you were to go outside and look at a mountain, look at a lake, and you were truly to sit there with no phone, no distractions, just sit there and appreciate the view, to look at the snowy peaks and how the snow and the rock layers kind of mesh together into one beautiful picture. You know, how many clouds are hovering above the mountain itself. Are there trees off in the distance? Like, those are the aspects of our senses. What does it smell like? Out on the mountain. Those are places and scenarios where our senses are truly engaged. And I don't think enough of us who have been blessed to have the gift of sight and hearing, we do not use those senses enough. Certainly not to their highest capacity. And I think Helen Keller's next point proves this perfectly. So she said, "Recently I was visited by a very good friend who had just returned from a long walk in the woods, and I asked her what she had observed. 'Nothing in particular,' she replied." And then Helen Keller responds, "I might have been incredulous had I not been accustomed to such responses. For long ago I became convinced that the seeing see little. How was it possible, I asked myself, to walk for an hour through the woods and see nothing worthy of note?" Now you have to keep in mind, this is coming from someone who was... Helen Keller was not born blind, but I think it was around 18, 19 months old. She lost her sight and her hearing. I don't know, without looking into it, I don't know if she had any visual memories or not, but that's a very early age, and the odds of having very many visual memories is very low. So you could make the argument that Helen Keller practically lived her whole life blind, and in reality I would say she did. So that statement, let me read it again. "How was it possible, I asked myself, to walk for an hour through the woods and see nothing worthy of note?" So that statement is coming from someone who cannot see. Because to Helen Keller, she doesn't understand how you could walk through the woods, see the grass and the dirt and the herbs coming up from the ground, the birds flying and singing through the air, the mushrooms growing on the trees, maybe some wildlife occasionally walking through the woods, the smells and the feeling of the fresh air. How could you not appreciate the sights and sounds of that experience? And I think so many of us, we live our lives just like that, where, like Helen Keller accused us, rightfully so, of seeing very little. And we need to learn to take the time to slow down, to look at our environment, to listen to the sounds, to take in the smells, to see what there is to be seen. And at first glance, this may just sound kind of, I don't know, basic common knowledge, but it's something that none of us practice. You see, science understands now that when we go stand in nature, when we put away the distractions, and we go for a hike and breathe the fresh air, and we enjoy the calm that is nature itself. They actually find that your blood pressure drops, your brain activity calms down, and you tend to get a little bit of an energy boost just by being out in nature. Everyone has different thoughts on why that is. My personal belief, just because I'm a Christian, is that we were made from the dirt, is what the Bible says. And so I tend to think that we feel our best in nature because we were literally made from it. Um, Now, to be fair, I think if you had an evolutionary standpoint, that you'd probably come to a similar conclusion. We just have different views on how we got there, I guess. But my point with all that being, we need to learn to get outside again and to engage with all of our senses and not just consume things and use our bodies passively. And not just because a blind historical figure told us to, but because the truth of what she is saying is something that each and every one of us needs to come to terms with. Because what they've learned is that if someone has lost one or more of their senses, their other senses get stronger. And so, for example, Helen Keller at one point, she described how for her touch was a big thing because that would have been, one of the few senses that she still had. But she said that she could look at something, for example, she could take a pen, and she said she could spend an hour like feeling over the pen and trying to find different like indentations and what's this little button do, and this little clip, are there any ridges along this pen, like she would take the time to study objects forever because that was how she saw things. She was curious about what made something up, and we need to be curious, especially if we have all of our senses, not just wait for us to lose one of them to then start engaging with the world around us. We need to enjoy the senses that we've been given, to appreciate life, and to experience life in this world in a brand new way. And on the note of seeing things in a brand new way, this is what Helen Keller says she would do if she was given the opportunity to see for 3 days. She said, "In the afternoon of that first seeing day, I should take a long walk in the woods and intoxicate my eyes on the beauties of the world of nature, trying desperately to absorb in a few hours the vast splendor which is constantly unfolding itself to those who can see." The poetic beauty of how she describes the visual world for someone who has not seen is incredible. I think she describes seeing better than many of us who can see would do, which is ironic. Because how many of us stop and look at nature and we want to basically get drunk, intoxicated on the sights and smells and touch of nature? I don't think hardly any of us talk like that, and we certainly don't do that, not on a regular basis. Instead, we need a blind person to tell us to actually see things and enjoy them again. And the irony, I think, is what is humbling me the most, is just looking at this essay that she wrote and recognizing, number one, how fortunate I am to be able to see, but number two, how is it that I miss out on so much in life? And I think the answer is right in front of me. It's because we stare at these things too much. We live inside of our four walls too much. And we don't take the time to stop and enjoy the little moments. And it doesn't always have to be entirely nature, but it could be stopping and just enjoying your child's laughter for a few minutes. It could be simply watching your grandparents and admiring how they've aged gracefully, hopefully, or just enjoying the sounds of a family get together and the casual conversation, the merrymaking. There's all these pieces to life that we overlook and we don't take the time to truly appreciate. And I think that's the main thing that Helen Keller is getting at. And as we close, I want to read one final quote, basically how she ends her essay. And honestly, I think I'm going to let Helen close out the video for us today. So Helen said, "I, who am blind, can give one hint to those who see. One admonition to those who would make full use of the gift of sight: use your eyes as if tomorrow you would be stricken blind. And the same method can be applied to the other senses. Hear the music of voices, the song of a bird, the mighty strains of an orchestra, as if you would be stricken deaf tomorrow. Touch each object you want to touch, as if tomorrow your tactile sense would fail. Smell the perfume of flowers. Taste with relish each morsel, as if tomorrow you could never smell and taste again. Make the most of every sense. Glory in all the facets of pleasure and beauty which the world reveals to you through the several means of contact which nature provides. But of all the senses, I am sure that sight must be the most delightful. Until next time, my friend, please take care. God bless.